So good afternoon or morning or whatever time of the day it is for you and whatever time zone you are in. We are so delighted to have you here to continue the conversation that was started on our most recent Listen, Learn, Explore podcast through Pioneer Network with our new good friend, Jan Spalding from John Knox Village, a conversation about a resident being on the board. And we're so pleased that, Jan, you're back for the conversation and you have brought members of your team with you who can share this conversation from lots of different perspectives. So maybe we'll start with introduction of Jan and Gerry and Monica, and then we'll get some questions and answers. We've got some ready, but we are so ready for all of you to ask the questions that are burning for you to ask. So Jan, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Okay, I'm Jan Spalding. I live at John Knox Village, and I have recently been on the board of directors for the past 3 years. I've been very involved in our various committees and Senate system here at John Knox.
Wonderful. And Gerry and Monica, you look like twins today. I love your blue. You didn't send a memo out to everybody else.
I'm Monica McFee.
Hi, sis.
This is our talk show format. I am the Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at John Knox Village, and I have the pleasure of working here. I've been here 6.5 years, and I get to work with a number of the people that I'm seeing on screen, and have had the opportunity to work very closely with Jan over the last few years that she was on the board, as well as Ellen and Sherry and Dave and let's see who else, and Terry, of course, and I work very closely with Rob Seitz. Just one thing to share very briefly is that a unique role that I had is I came into the organization just doing sales and marketing. And over the past 3 years, I have also been working with our lifestyle. So where we make a promise to our residents, we're able to fulfill that promise through the lifestyle that we provide through our programming, through life enrichment, spiritual life, meaningful life, and wellness fitness programming. Wonderful. And my colleague to the left.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you again, Joan. There are many people on this Zoom that I know, and I greatly appreciate their leadership, their support. We're looking forward to a good conversation. I've had the privilege for the last almost 9.5 years to be here at John Knox Village and the leadership role and CEO. So really excited to share with you what makes John Knox Village here at Pompano Beach unique, because it's all about relationships and it's all about engaging and utilizing talent.
Super. And we are so delighted to have you on speaking on behalf of Pioneer Network. And so let's just get this conversation going. Again, we were delighted. We are all about supporting and promoting resident voice. And when we learned about, actually it was Carol, who's on the call with us, who put the bug in my ear, said, hey, I know a community who's doing some phenomenal things. Now you might notice her name has a similarity to someone else's name. So there may be a little nepotism here, but it's all good. It's all okay. And so Carol introduced us to Jan, and we were able to do a podcast where she shared her experiences as a member of the board. So can we start out maybe, Jan, share a little bit? Well, let me ask a question. How many of you on the call have listened to the podcast? Just about everybody. Okay. And some, we see that sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's okay. Because you can listen afterwards or you can just listen again. But Jen, can you kind of get us up to speed? Tell us a little bit about the structure of your residence setting, or if you would like Gerry or Monica to help with that, that's great too. A little bit about the structure of your residence setting, maybe a little bit of history. How did this all come to be? What brought about this crazy idea?
Well, I think that the idea actually came up because in the very early 70s, John Knox went into bankruptcy, and after that, there was in the receivership there was a lot of talk about having the resident voice involved, and then Florida they passed some state legislatures that said we had to have local board of directors and some of the things like that. But I think the first person who was on that I've been able to research that was on the board was a woman, and she was the first resident board member in 1979, I believe it was, or 78. So we go back we have a long history of having residents on the board. And now we have a fairly structured system in terms of how we pick people to go on the board and how the board gets names and how they then decide on who is they'd like to have on that year. And we go on for a 3-year rotation, and that's about it in terms
Gerry or
of
Monica?
how it happens.
Gerry or Monica, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Frank Furman, for close to 25 years in his leadership, he has a great deal of merit to how John Knox Village got started. And as Jan pointed out, went through that bankruptcy. We were Baptist retirement community at one point, and then because of branding John Knox Village, because of what had been going on in the central part of this country and how that brand was expanding, gave us an opportunity to be renewed. Frank Furman, a local insurance businessman, along with several other people, came together, and it was Frank Furman that looked at the current board of local Pompano Beach people and said, we need to be representative of the people that are going to live here. And it was Frank Furman that began having and working with Florida associations, Leading Age and others, that said, look, we want to position this so that John Knox Village has the right representation. So Frank Furman got it started. We've only had 3 chairmen over the 54 plus year youth of this organization. So, but now we have term limits for various officers, and yet we've also grown from not just being a Pompano Beach, but being a national board, meaning that instead of utilizing the parochial opportunities and insights that come from knowing Pompano Beach, Broward County, which is the largest county in the state of Florida, but also utilizing the great experiences and skill sets needed to support an executive management team as a board. And so we are now utilizing Zoom, which we've all are really appreciating today. And we use a national board composition, not just a local one.
Wonderful. I guess the thing that I find most fascinating is when you bring up when this all started, back in the 70s. You know, for so many organizations, this is just such a novel idea today in 2022, to know that this started pre OBRA and pre so many of the reforms that happened in the long-term care business profession as a whole. And you've been doing it all those times. So as an administrator, you know, I guess I'll start with a question and then we'll kind of bounce it out to some other people. As an administrator, Gerry, as I've worked with people who very much believe in the concept of resident voice, and certainly they're from all the different continuums of care, and I know that John Knox Village has the full continuum of care, skilled and assisted and independent living. Oftentimes you hear, you know, but the resident forums end up being nothing but a complaint session, and, you know, how do you keep it going, and how do you get the right people, and what kind of information do you really want to share, and all those things that kind of hold people back from creating the kind of really meaningful forums that you have obviously created with your residents. So as an administrator, what would you say to others who are kind of skeptical about this whole idea?
Well, I'd start by saying, if you really want to avoid petitions and you really want to avoid not truly be, you know, the value here is by listening, people feel heard. And just within the last month, I've had some opportunities because we've had a lot of new people pursuing John Knox Village because we have a new part of our property called Westlake that's opening up in February of 2024. And we've had a lot of people move in and choose to live here because they wanted to enjoy the lifestyle, and others that are awaiting the opening. So you can either choose to either listen and have your community feel heard, or you can have petitions and all sorts of things that go on. And over the years, John Knox Village isn't perfect, but I'd like to just turn to Monica and say, we've learned a lot over developing a master vision plan, sharing it with our community, and how change is difficult for all of us as individuals. That change has turned into an awareness, ongoing education, because you can plan things, but things change. And there's an excitement that's been growing about how we're not going to just be disrupted, but how we're going to exist in the next 50 years, given what is it that older adults want now and over the next 5 to 10 years. So talk a little bit about the forums and the resident engagement survey we just did, and the why and the what and how we're going from there.
Like, I think any community, I mean, communication is just so incredibly critical. And I think what Gerry was also alluding to is this opportunity for authentic communication. There's a level of transparency and authenticity that isn't contrived. And that, I think, is meaningful. And I would really love to hear from our residents that are online, that we make every attempt to be available to our resident population. We do that through resident board meetings, resident Senate meetings, the Senate committee meetings. We do cluster meetings. There are multiple venues for us to interact with residents. We recently completed U.S. News and World Report resident satisfaction survey. I will be completely transparent that, you know, our 3 top areas where we saw kind of the greatest opportunity to engage with our residents included communication. The only form of communication we have not gone to is rolling up the little scrolls for our pigeons, but we cover technology, we cover print, we cover forums, we cover digital platform, and frankly, that was one area. Then parking was another area, and dining. And from what we've gleaned from our colleagues who implement the survey, those are typically the 3 biggest areas. You know, there's always the great debate over green beans, al dente, or overcooked. But what we did based on that information was very specifically set up 2 forums in the beginning of the day and the end of the day to meet with residents, to sign up for roundtable discussions. And from that, we gleaned some really interesting items that we can act upon immediately. You know, we call them fast rocks here at JKV, that we can act immediately. And then there are things that will take longer amounts of time to implement, research, and fund, frankly. But that's an opportunity. And what we gleaned out of that experience is that we are going to have regular quarterly roundtable meetings. We've already been implementing roundtable meetings for our life enrichment to get feedback from residents to find out what is it they want to do, that they want to participate in, cultural and humanities, that kind of thing. So I'd love to hear, you know, I would say I'm going to throw it to my friend Dave Baer for a moment. Dave, of course, has been very involved with FLICRA over the years. And although Dave per se is not acting on behalf of the voting member of the board, he's helping right now on the committee for the nominating committee. And Dave brings quite a bit of information to us from FLICRA that we can then share with residents. And Dave, you've been involved. I mean, Dave and his wife, Jackie, jumped right into JKV. We were so lucky to have them as volunteers. But Dave and Jackie on their own go to Leading Age. They go to FLICRA. Dave, what is your overall impression of what administration does perhaps differently from what you know through FLICRA?
Well, I think everybody's pretty well aware that I'm one of the biggest fans of John Knox Village. There may be some that are as big as I am, but nobody any bigger. My basic interest in this subject is having more resident representation on a board of directors is very much a point of interest on the FLICRA board, our Florida Life Care Resident Association board, and also on the NACRA board. And it's a subject that we discuss frequently, and how can we increase that membership and increase that participation. And the other thing that happened that really brought this home to me about the contributions that that residents can make is that, as Monica mentioned, I recently chaired a local committee to come up. We have 3 resident members on the board of directors, and they are voting members. We've had it, as Jen said, since the 70s. I think it's a good thing. We were really amazed this year. We put out a call. There's a lot of work involved, and it's my understanding that in past years, although we've had the talent here, there's been so much work to do on the board that some residents that just sort of shied away from it. This year we had 8 applicants. They were excellent. We did a lot of screening. We reviewed their resumes. We did the interviews, and we were tasked to come up with 3. Frankly, we couldn't decide on 3. We're going to send 4 names forward, and which we'll do next week. And the thing that was so impressive is that the qualifications of these 4 individuals, they've all served on boards other than John Knox Village in their working careers. And they are very, very talented. They bring so much to the table. So I think that they will not only be able to represent the needs of John Knox Village from a business standpoint, not interested in squishy peas or al dente, but truly in what it takes to keep this organization a great organization and to make it prosper in the future. So I think that they bring those talents, plus they do bring the viewpoint of the residents to the other members of the board of directors. So I think it's even, Gerry pointed out about the importance of transparency, but I think that you'll find that these, whichever one the Senate chooses to be the next representative on the board of directors, will be there, will make a very, very positive contribution to the overall actions on the board. So that's my interest. And we'd like to see every CCRC in the United States have voting members, voting residents on their board of directors. And that's sort of the aim. So that's
What a great vision.
That's where I'm coming from.
What a great vision.
I think maybe to help that process along, I think that people don't realize when we're talking about the Senate, most other communities are really talking about their resident council. And I think we need to be clear about that because I think a lot of people have resident councils, but they may not have them set up in exactly the same way we have ours. But ours makes it very easy to be able to bring leaders forward and then be able to have a committee that can choose from leadership to recommend to the board of directors for their consideration. So I think that that's the process, and I think it's really good. And Dave just finished doing that and did a wonderful job.
I think that's a very important point, Jen. What we call the Senate, that consists of currently 10 committees and two subcommittees, and those groups currently meet monthly. Each committee has 12 residents on it, plus a chairperson who is a resident. And Gerry has designated liaison from the administration to go to attend those meetings and to work with the chairs of those various committees, building and grounds, finance, life enrichment, healthcare, and it runs the gamut. But that creates, from a resident point of view, that creates a very dynamic opportunity for a wide range of residents to engage in the activity in the structure of the community, which I will confess I am also a resident board member here at John Knox. I'm just going into the second year of my term, and to me, that having the Senate allows the resident board members to really focus on the big picture of where the community is going. What are the factors that are pressing in on us? What challenges do we have to overcome that are corporate as opposed to individual?
I would also add that's something that I think that Gerry talked about a little bit as far as trying to diversify the board and trying to create a national footprint, if you will, with talent. And frankly, that has really been one of our objectives related to the residents that we're attracting to John Knox Village. Just in my 6.5-year tenure, we went from a very traditional, and I'm just going to be very transparent and blunt, white Christian perspective. And we have very, very intentionally tried to broaden our reach to the Jewish community, to the LGBT community, to the Catholic community, to the African American community, to the Latin American and Creole community. So we were very intentionally doing that, and very intentionally trying to have those voices reflected in what our residents' needs, wants, and desires are. And I'm also going to do a shout out to my friend Ellen Isaac, if she's still on. Ellen is been a pleasure to work with, and Ellen helps us think about things from different perspectives, as does Jan with a background in psychology, and Terry with his experience in government affairs, and Sherry is just so thoughtful in her commentary. She was very active in participating in our roundtable discussions. And I would just say, from my perspective, it's an honor for me to work, and Gerry talks about working with, for, and alongside our residents. So for us as the administration, if you will, we get to have this incredible opportunity to work with you all to help us garner and glean a perspective that we may not have. So I think that that's where we have this opportunity for this really authentic, transparent, really genuine opportunity for growth, for innovation, and for respect, which frankly, in my career, it did not exist in the number of the communities that I've been exposed to over the years. There was kind of a we and them culture. And we are definitely a culture of us and we, wouldn't you say?
Very much so. I know
Can I
there's
give another
question.
perspective?
Absolutely, Ramsey.
We are a obligated group, which is part of Westminster Communities of Florida. There are 10 CCRCs involved in the obligated group, which is a unique concept of the CCRC model. But aside from that, Westminster Communities of Florida communicates with each community via the residents' council. That is their conduit to the residents. The council is set up much like the Senate that you have. It has 5 standing committees, which are major committees for dining, health services, and maintenance, things like that. There are other special committees that are focused on. One of those is finances. I'm chair of the finance committee, which reviews the quarterly finances with Westminster Communities of Florida every quarter, is part of the transparency of knowing somewhat where the finances are. The difficulty is the chair of the Residents' Council is a member of the board of directors, a non-voting, non-participating member of the board of directors. And it's also set up, there are regional board of directors for each geographic region, of which I think there are 4 in Florida. And they kind of communicate more directly with the communities that are in each region, so that the chair of the council gets more information about their particular region. They are not in any way allowed to interact or discuss with the board of directors in the meeting. They make a report as to where they are, what's going on, and at some point they may suggest there are issues, but in reality the board doesn't really want to hear those because they want good news, not problems. So it's kind of a difficult position, because we get information, for instance, every year when we go through the annual review of what's your monthly rate going to be, and they tell us why it's going up and all those things they have to tell us. but there's really no discussion about it. There's no understanding from the resident standpoint as to what the impact is or what those things are. One of the things that I really picked up on in the podcast earlier, and something that Gerry said earlier as CEO, the part that's missed in a lot of providers' relationships with their communities is they don't listen. They want the residents to sit there, be thankful for what they have, and be grateful for everything that they're given. They forget the fact that there are a lot of residents that are not senile old people sitting in their rocking chairs. We have been in industry, we have been in professional positions, and we have a lot to offer. But a lot of providers don't offer the opportunity to listen. I'm very impressed with John Knox Village, with the roundtables and the talking to the residents, because you're right. Most of the board of directors have never been in an assisted living environment. They maybe have never had a relative or a parent in those kinds of relationships, and they have no clue what the issues are. So I am, much like David, pushing very hard to help the providers and the state of Florida recognize that the CCRC model needs to be enhanced. And I think that John Knox Village is obviously a very leading edge position in doing that, because the newer residents coming in have totally different demands of those that came in 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It needs to be, there are a number of things that need to be addressed. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm in complete agreement with, we need to do more to make this happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I-
Rosalind. We have a couple hands up.
Yeah.
Patricia and Ellen and Jim, I see your hands. So
I just wanted to say that my situation with Indian River Estates is very similar to what Ramsey was talking about. We are run by the Axe Corporation, which is based in West Point, Pennsylvania, and they have about 27 properties up and down the East Coast. And I've been here for 16 years. And what I've noticed in the last few years is a sense of they don't really care what we think. And so this need for communication is really, really important. So I'm very impressed with what's being done at John Knox Village. My question is, how many residents are actually voting members on your board?
3.
Right. And did they
Right.
vote everything, even financial affairs?
Yep, we vote everything that comes up, and we have a voice in any decision that is being made.
Mhm.
We're looking at it just in the exact same way as any other community, any other board member is.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I think being a standalone property makes it a bit easier than.
I think you're right. I think that would be much easier.
Yeah. So it's a different dynamic. It doesn't mean we can't accomplish it, but it's just maybe a little bit more difficult with 27 properties than it is with one. But I'm so impressed with what you've done. It's really
I
terrific.
was talking with somebody from Massachusetts who is in this, it's not an Axe, but it's a similar type of group owned places. And they were saying they felt as though they were so blessed because the board of directors came and talked to them once every 4 years. I mean, 4 times every year. Yeah. And I thought, well, I think that's in the I know it's in the Florida statutes. I think it might be in the national. I mean, the board of directors is required to talk to the residents and give a report 4 times a year. So, I couldn't believe that was their standard of what communication was about, when we live here and have just a ton of ways to communicate our thoughts and desires.
Yeah.
There are no national requirements for that. It's all state. All state.
Oh, is it all state? Okay, I didn't know.
Nothing national.
Ellen, I know you've been wanting to share with us. You're on mute.
Yeah, and I apologize. I was sitting outside and my iPad overheated. So I got kicked out, and I don't know if anybody said this, but following along what Terry was saying, yes, there's the committees. and the senates, but then there are senators. So there's an even, I don't want to say lower level, another level. There's a senator for every cluster. A cluster could be, I live in a villa with my husband, 15 villas. It could be 2 floors in a high rise. And the non-elected resident can at any time talk to their senator about something, write to the committee chair about something. There are cluster meetings every other month, as there are resident board meetings. And I have been a senator. I've been on the resident executive committee. But from day one, I have never felt that I could not reach someone. Not all my ideas are taken, obviously not, but there is a professionalism, but an openness and an ease of communicating that is very unique.
Wonderful. Well, and when you talk about the communication, I do have a question that, and I think we did talk about this a little in the podcast. As a CCRC, it obviously most of your representation comes from the independent living side, from the residents who live there. So how do you make sure that those individuals living in assisted living or in the skilled nursing center, or whatever you're calling it in your organization, or even those who are living with dementia, who may be in a memory care, how do you make sure that those voices also are heard within this resident structure?
One of the ways is that the healthcare committee tries very hard to always have someone on their in their committee, a committee member who is living in either assisted living or skilled nursing, usually skilled nursing. We used to have it more in assisted living, but in both. And they have a voice through the committee that they serve on, the healthcare committee. I think we could have more. I don't know exactly how we would go about it because transportation and space and things become a limitation. But I agree with you that there should be probably a little bit more voice there, and we could probably work on that.
I would follow up by saying, Jan, we do roundtable discussions definitely for assisted living, and then we do meetings in our individual homes for greenhouse as well. Absolutely, it would be awesome if we could find a better way. Transportation does become a challenge to help people ambulate from one area of the campus to where we would be holding meetings. We've been using, one of the blessings of COVID is we've really been doing things through remote, through Zoom, the way we're much like we're doing this. That's really important. And the other thing I mentioned earlier is like just breaking down those silos. So for example, we look at the healthcare settings, that's part of our entire community. We don't separate that out. Physically, we try to get as many people to attend and participate in events as we possibly can for communication. But we also, our directors, our administrators of those buildings are at all of those meetings. And to point out that recent resident satisfaction that we did included everyone in healthcare, even those who were maybe suffering from some cognitive issues. If they weren't able to do it, then we reached out to their primary caregivers or next of kin, if you will, to help get their feedback and their voice as part of that overall survey. One other point I just want to make before we move on is just to say, I really applaud the residents, because especially the ones that are voting members of the board, because I will tell you that there are some decisions that they have to make that are not always the popular vote, right? Especially when it comes to maybe increasing monthly service fees or what have you. So they really become an ambassador for helping to educate the broader population who may not have that intimate understanding or awareness of finances, long-range planning, strategic planning, communication, healthcare committees. So I really applaud all the people who are those wonderful voices who have to make, just like anyone in any life situation, make challenging or difficult decisions. So I applaud all of you for doing that.
Yeah.
Joan, I know you see Jim Haynes' hand up. It's been up for a bit.
Go for it, Jim.
Thanks. I'll lower it. There you go. Well, I'm delighted to be with you all. I'm learning a lot, and I want to shout out to my good friend and Dave Byer and his wife Jackie for putting me up to this. Yes, I listened to the podcast, I think maybe 4 times. I've sent the podcast probably to half a dozen or more people. I think it was extremely well done. I'm with NACRA, which Dave may have mentioned to you, but I like to say we have communication is our middle name. And when people ask, well, what do you do? I say we advocate, we communicate, and we educate. And so right in the middle is communicating. It's so important. And I'm being educated by you right now, everybody on this call. We have an unfortunate situation where we live, and we do not have a member, any members on our board of governors. It's a secret society, I call it. We don't even know when they meet. There are very few people here would even recognize a board member. If you press them to say, name one, they'll say, and they're just not engaged. And we have an unfortunate situation where our CEO for many years retired, and we have a new CEO about a year ago, and that's an issue. So there's a better way, and I'm thinking a lot about that and participating in meetings like this. And I thank you so much for having me here. I want to say I'm particularly interested in Monica being the Chief Innovation Officer. I don't think I know another organization that has a CIO. It's usually the Chief Information Officer. But this industry needs innovation. And Gerry, I met you, as you remember, gosh, it's been 2 years ago. I think I was the last outsider to visit before COVID shut down. My sister was on her way, and she couldn't even get on the airplane to come down the next week. And what I found there that was innovative was the greenhouse. And I have gotten very, very involved in that and interested in it. So yes, innovation is alive and well as I can see at John Knox Village. So thank you very much.
Jim, I might just add one thing to that, and that is, I think the greenhouse was one of the things that really brought forward a lot of resident voice and a lot of ability to move for the residents to move a idea forward and have it come to completion. And that was because we were looking to remodel our healthcare system, our healthcare facility. And the residents went out and found the greenhouse and insisted that be what was built. And then at that point, Gerry comes into the picture, and there's no holding us back.
Yeah, I'm aware of that because Diane Osmer sent me the paper that I think she wrote it, about the history of how the greenhouse took shape there. And I was fascinated by it.
I think it's projects like that that can help every facility, whatever you are, whether it's a nursing home or whether it's a CCRC. I think that getting the residents involved, and especially in their own health care, if you're ever going to have to remodel anything, get your residents up there and get them involved. And administration, and if enough people are involved, they sort of are going to have to listen to some point.
Thank you, Jan. Ramsey, I know you've had your hand up for a little bit there.
Yes, I have 2 quick questions. One of them is to Gerry. Is your organization a member of Leading Age Florida?
Yes, we are. State and national.
Part of I have a relationship with Leading Age and also a relationship with Stryker. I'm also chair of the Governor's Continuing Care Advisory Council. And to share some of my frustration, I do not feel that I have the governor in my corner because he hasn't assigned all the people necessary to fill out this council. And I can't communicate with him. But my point is, in order to move this concept that you guys have so successfully implemented, how do we get to the other providers in the state of Florida and encourage them to be as open as an understanding in doing it? I'm kind of at a dilemma. I have mentioned this to the our meetings with OIR, because we have oversight for the OIR, Office of Insurance Regulation in Florida, but it seems to not go anywhere.
Well, one of the things you all know, before I even say this, is that, well, Patricia, you mentioned, well, we've got 4 regions, we've got a lot, many of you talked about multiple sites. Well, John Knox Village, well, the second largest single site in the state of Florida, Shell Point being the largest. It's not about being the largest. It's about understanding that if you took our, what will be close to 1,200, 1,300 some residents and people, as we move into the future, it's people will walk to where they feel heard, and they will spend their money where they feel heard and engaged. And so while this may be a delay, we've had all sorts of things come to us for acquisition, partnerships, people that have defaulted on their bond, master trust indenture. The future is going to be kind of a why. People will either lead by understanding what people want today, tomorrow, and the future, and successfully engage so that you can be listening and felt heard, or people will walk and spend their money elsewhere and their occupancy will drop. If you had shared with me that 36 years ago in my first tour of Florida, the properties around our Broward County area would be defaulting because of occupancy, then those types of symptoms start to kind of say to those management companies, I spent the first 8 years of my learned knowledge developing with Life Care Services, which was kind of the IBM of retirement communities back in the late 70s, 80s. And so I really believe, Ramsey, that while our organization has had many different residents serve like yourself on the Governor's Council, there's ways to influence this. I would suggest that you first start with that executive, whether you're looking at Monica and myself. You know, I've chosen leaders as I came on and had this privilege here that really have this knowledge of and fit of, do you understand what the future resident and current residents want? And I seek and find and retain leadership that understands doing just for is not the answer. Doing with and alongside and for is the answer. So I first of all think, Ramsey, that while we may have political issues, there's ways of using associations like Leading Age, but people, residents, those of you that are here, you've already made an investment in the community you're in. So that feels pretty much stuck if all of a sudden it's not working the way you want. However, I believe that influence will continue to move forward by all of you that say, hey, we want to be heard. And again, no executive wants a petition going to a board of directors saying you're not leading well. But at the same time, if you sit down and you share what your concerns are, and you're, as to several of the comments made today, Ellen and others, look, if you're open-minded, which is one of our values, then that executive team ought to be able to listen. But clearly, Ramsey, people are choosing to live where they feel that they can be heard. And so financially, a lot of communities will go through, unfortunately, a situation where they will drop in their occupancy because people don't see themselves aligned to that lifestyle. And John Knox Village is developing an institute. The institute is, how do you develop leaders, not only at the board level, and how do they not become just small parochial mindsets that don't allow people to grow and understand and learn? And how do we also grow management teams? So we have a development process we're looking at here where we can continue to say, what does it take to be a board member? What does it take to be a resident and community board member? What does it take to be an effective management team working with a board, working with a Senate leadership? We're starting to learn this year some of the things that are working that are working, not working, and we're lifelong learners here, I'd like to think. So I think I would be more than happy. I know many of the execs of the properties you all live in. And you know, we're the international training site for the greenhouse model. So, and we just learned today some new things that just fascinated us on how to take dining to the next level for lifestyle as well as across this continuum. So I'm looking forward to how we can share more there. But if there are opportunities for our board members, our resident leadership, and Monica, myself, and other team members to help your communities have these frank discussions, then I can tell you, we don't do everything right here, but darn it, when someone starts to get a petition and it hits the board, or someone writes a long email of just being disgruntled, that should be a wake-up call for an executive. But you can avoid those by just beginning this discussion like we're having today, Joe.
I would also offer, Ramsey, I hope you're, I see those applause, that's great. I don't know, have you reached out at all to Steve Bamer?
What did you ask the question?
Yes, I have conversations with Steve on a regular basis. I've encouraged him to speak out at the annual meeting with the Office of Insurance Regulation. So yeah, we work together. He works with FLACRA. FLACRA obviously is the proponent for residents. Leading Age is a proponent for providers. And although they don't always agree, they have learned to peacefully coexist and work together for the betterment of all the residents. So that's a good relationship. And Leading Age Florida, I think, has also set the stage for a lot of things at the national level. So things are starting to really come around. The recognition that NACRA has gained and what they're doing is making a lot of difference. I get calls from other parts of the country about how do you make sure that certain things happen. The state of Florida actually has statute 651, which painfully dictates every detail of what you need to do. And while it's very encompassing, it's a very good thing for the residents, and we all work together to continue to improve that. So there's a lot going on, and having been in major industry for over 40 years, I have been known to be told that I'm very impatient and I want things to move faster. And like Gerry said, you have to develop the people, you have to develop the leaders. And there's a difference between a leader and a manager in order to get where we need to go. So that's what we're doing. And I think this is a good opportunity to share ideas and, you know, improve contacts, people we can talk to move forward. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Well, thank you, Ramsey. I said, Verna's had her hand up for a little bit. So here's a great contact for you, Ramsey, because I can vouch for Verna. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this. This is fascinating. I'm at Claremont Park in Denver, and our CEO is Jill Vitale Awesome. And I'm listening to you, and I wanted to just give you our case. Myself and one of my team members, who's excellent, we had been going to conferences for a number of years and seeing tremendous resistance and leadership and team members and even residents to resident-directed communities. And that really bothered us because we were so pleased with our community and what was involved. So we just began writing with Pioneer Network, writing podcasts. We did Eden. The two of us went to state conferences, Colorado, New England, and then to national conferences. And now we're working on a continuum that's gone from person-centered, resident-directed, and now what we call the Citizenship Model. And that's really about how residents can bring their gifts to their community fully, both the inside and the outside community. And so it has exploded from resistance to just a really advanced model. And so part of that was COVID, because we knew we had to do better. And so things are afire, I mean, really, and you just build on that fire. So I thank you very much. But when you're dealing with a cutting edge idea, get it out there and find partners nationally. And you would be amazed how fast the news spreads and how it even builds and becomes refined. So go for it. The other thing I might mention is a couple things is one of the most harmful things, rather than indifference, total indifference by leadership, is what I call mimic listening, the nodding and the smiling, and nothing ever happens. There's got to be feedback and inclusion. And in the citizenship model, our communities ask, what are your gifts? What can you bring to this issue? How can you work with us? And that inclusion is really critical. And the last thing I would say is we are a Christian-based organization, and many of us did not fit in and felt excluded. And I really appreciate the us versus we and them. And so we've just started a little, for lack of a better word, a non-denominational group that goes from Unitarian, Quaker on up to agnostic and atheist, and a non-judgmental listening group that deals with social justice issues and spirituality and so on and so forth. And that has been really a comfort to many people who have felt excluded. So just a couple of thoughts to throw out to you.
Thank you, Verna. Terry, I know you were looking to say something.
Well, I just wanted to, it would be remiss if I didn't, and Jan's well aware of this too, to just mention, and this will blow your socks off, our CEO, Gerry Stryker, every Friday morning at 6:15 meets with the resident board members, and we go for a walk around the campus. And we do that for about 45 minutes, and then we adjourn to for a light breakfast. And that is an opportunity for Gerry. I think we sometimes, you can back me up, Jan, I think sometimes we feel that we're Gerry's shrink, but that's nevertheless, and it's a job we relish, all three of us, because managing a CCRC or managing any community like this is a challenge, and especially with what's going on in the world today. So I want to give a shout out to Gerry and the attitude that he brings to how to run this community.
I have to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat.
Bye, Patricia.
Terry,
I would just add that it's funny because I'll get a phone call at about 8:28 or something. Okay, because he's just been on the walk with you all. But I've never worked in my whole career in an environment where there is this opportunity for inclusion. I don't know if Verna's still on, but I'm so happy to hear that she's able to do that. And I would just genuinely offer to all of you that if you would ever care to come and visit John Knox Village, we would be delighted to host you for a staycation as our guests. Join us perhaps in shadowing some of our meetings. We are always looking to increase our relationships and stewardship with other people and communities. We have some ideas for a few projects that we'd love to maybe engage you all with. And Joan, maybe we can talk a little bit about another podcast and some ideas that we're introducing. And Terry, I think that Carol probably would have some question about your being a shrink to Gerry. And Ramsey, if we can help in any way with leading age, we have a fabulous rapport with Steve Bamer, and it sounds like you do as well. But if we can help with maybe even the governor's office, because we were really fortunate because of our best practices to have the governor here on campus as we administered the first round of COVID vaccinations on campus. So we'd be delighted to help and support you all in any way.
We've got just about 3 minutes left. So do we have some folks who haven't had a chance to say something? That Rob, I see your mute is off. Are you ready?
A quick question. Yes, I've had a number of residents ask if this was recorded, and I noted that it was. And will you be sending out a link that I can share with them?
Absolutely. It'll be on Pioneer Network's website under our Listen, Learn, Explore podcasts. So it should be up by the end of the day today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Joan, you haven't disappointed. This has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you for putting this together. It's long overdue, and we need more of this.
Absolutely. And I think everyone who's on this call, I think sometimes when you are the one that has that innovation, that has that passion, it feels like things aren't moving fast enough. But there's so many people out there that don't even know they need to know this. And I think that's the challenge that we have within long-term care, within the CCRC environment, whatever it is. To have leaders like all of you is incredible. I'll just make a few comments. One of the comments, as I listened to you and you talked about the Senate versus the traditional resident council, I'm a big proponent in language and how we say things. And maybe it is time to shift our language, maybe by thinking that resident care model, that resident council model, we have all those stereotypes that are a part of that model about the kind of that superficial listening that somebody mentioned earlier today, and then nodding at the head versus really engaging. When I listened to Monica talk about how the forums are held, if I didn't know that this was a conversation about holding forums with residents, I would have thought it was somebody talking about how they're going to engage their leadership team in making changes. And why would that, that shouldn't be different. How I engage anyone in a change process, in a conversation, it shouldn't be one way for the residents and one way for everybody else. And I think that's the thing that I heard as I listened to you talk. It isn't. It is, there is a way to engage people, and that means all people. And, as someone who believes so passionately in the person-directed care and onto Berna, the citizenship model that is growing out of it, there is such hope when we hear the kind of things that we've heard today in this last hour. Sherry?
Yes, and on another positive, and to kind of help in the meeting, the employees are not called employees at John Knox. They're called team members, which I love. And I think it shows a real respect to those that are working at John Knox. So it really is a family, but team members, I love that.
What a testimony to all of you at John Knox, whatever your role is at the community. And we are at the top of the hour, so I do want to respect everyone's time because I do know how very precious that is. But as I shared, this has been recorded, and we will have the recording up and live. And as Monica and Gerry said, our hope is that this is the beginning of a conversation and the beginning of more work to share this message and to help find a way to help others. One of my favorite phrases that we use at Pioneer Network, it came from Barbara Frank, who was one of our founders, and it is share shamelessly. What we know we need to use to help everyone grow. And so that is our hope for the future. So Gerry and Monica and Jan and everyone who was here a part of this conversation, thank you so very much. And we wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Joan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate you all.
Most.